You know what really makes us mad is wasting money on CDs with only one or two good songs.
Yeah. Tell them about punk.
What's up, posers? Welcome to Punklottopod. I'm your co-host, Justin Hensley.
I'm your other co-host, Dylan Hensley.
And this is the show where we choose 1 year at random and select one punk, hardcore, emo, or punk-adjacent album from that year to discuss. Today, we have a Patreon-sponsored episode. So, welcome aboard, Zach. Your first pledge for Patreon was for the $10 tier, so that's amazing. Thank you so much for joining us. And we'll get into what everything we're going to be talking about today and his pick and everything. But he picked the album, so we're devoting a whole episode to it. If you would like to pick an album and to get a whole episode dedicated to it, head over to our patreon.com/punklottopod. It could be anything. I mean, we tend to lean punk, but I don't know. Pick whatever you want. We'll talk about it.
Not whatever you want.
Dylan's always saying no.
Yes, there are notable exceptions.
Right.
I think you can figure them out.
If that's not your speed, head over to the $1 tier where you get access to all of our weekly bonus audio. For the month of December, you're going to get a shitload of audio. Like, you're getting so much audio. I guess I shouldn't say shit in the first 2 minutes of the podcast, but whatever. Does that matter? You're getting a ton of audio. Currently, I am engaged in an idea that is working better than I thought it would. I have not run out yet. It is 2022 A to Z. This is where I go through every single artist I listen to who released a record in 2022 alphabetically and record an audio for each letter that's going up every weekday of the month of December. Let's see. I just recorded, as of this recording, G, which that went up on Friday. So as of this episode going up, you'll get episode J will be up. So that's currently the notes that I'm working on. So I hope I can stay ahead. 6 days?
He's doing a bonus audio every single day, and yet he's still making me sit and talk about modern rock radio charts from 1995. So yeah, you're getting tons of content this month. This is the time to sign up.
Yeah. If you're curious about that modern rock audio, that was last week's bonus Patreon audio. And we did a chart dive, except we'd already done the year 1995 a couple times. So we did one on the Billboard Modern Rock charts. And we actually got a few comments on that, too. Dave Brown pointed out that Matt Sharp was Weezer's original bass player. That was a result of us being like, who are the Rentals? And then we got another correction from our good buddy Jason, who said Maya Rudolph was on the next record, which is, I think, a comment that you made.
Yeah, I completely blanked that that's who that even was. I said the name and I didn't even make the connection. But yes, I did know that before. I actually also did at some point previously know that Matt Sharp was, that the Rentals had a Weezer connection. So for some reason, when we hit record, my brain flushes down the toilet and I forget everything that I know and go, who's that? Sounds like Weezer. Yeah, because obviously. Well, I will probably listen to that Rentals record at some point next year because the calendar, my reusable calendar system, is bringing up 1995 next year. So that was kind of like a little preview. So I'm like, oh, here's the alternative stuff I might actually want to listen to.
Why don't you put some of this reusable calendar stuff as content on the Patreon?
I don't know what to do with it. It's too much work. I've created an exhaustive system for myself for listening to music. It's very stressful. Very unhappy with myself. I really wish that I could turn it off, but I've started it, and being a completist freak, I will do this for until I repeat a calendar. I'm pretty sure I will do this until I start repeating years. And I'll be like, oh, I'm finally done.
I'm free from this cursed rotation.
Which I don't even know when that's going to be.
Yeah. Maybe we get lucky and it'll be like the first one of those random ones that like shows up a million times.
Yeah, I think there are a couple of years that are more frequent just due to the way the whole leap year thing works.
Oh, and Jason also brought up a good question. He said, besides Avail, the Boss Tones, and the Happy Mondays, was there any other rock band that just had someone in the band that danced? I feel like there are, but I can't think of who they are.
Hawkwind.
Hawkwind had a dancer?
At one point. Yeah.
Was it
I can't remember her name. She would do like body paint and like
weird.
Like full nude dancing, like really interpretive stuff. Yeah, that's the only other one that comes to mind. It's an interesting idea. Like I think that like Hawkwind, that's kind of like the arty version of that. Mm-hmm. Like Bez dancing around with maracas, which is the reference.
Yeah.
And like the dancing guy from the Boss Tones, and I'm like, does that really do anything? Does that really add anything? Like the interpretive stuff, that's an interesting thing that I'm surprised that more bands don't do. More arty, experimental bands don't do.
Yeah, that's the kind of content you're getting over on the Patreon for $1. You're getting 22 pieces. No, let's say 22 plus how many weeks in December? 26 or 27 pieces of audio for the month of December alone on the Patreon for $1. Come on, can't beat that. Then throw in, we're coming up on the best of material, so that'll be the last week of December and the first week of January. And I'm already lining up recordings with our guest list audio from our friends like Dave Brown and Adam Yo and Ann Lepore. So there's a bunch of more audio coming for best of. And we got Christmas music next week.
This is our sweeps month.
This is the month where we do more than any other month. And 2023 will probably it might see the return of New Release Friday, since I don't have school on Fridays, and hopefully not work. We'll see if they accept my schedule exception request at work, but so no commitment there. But I did have an idea for, you know how we do for the Patreon that corresponds with the best of. We did a like punk charts for 2021 and then an overall chart for 2021. I thought maybe this year we could do, instead of 2 for 2022 this year, we could do a reflection on 4 years ago and see what stood up. Like just like a chart dive on 2018, the first year we did the podcast. See what held up, see what we think is still good from that time period.
That could be interesting, yeah.
Because we're never going to really like pick, maybe like 5 more years we'll start putting 2018 in the rotation for choices of album years, but nobody really cares about late 2010 stuff. So just an idea, threw it out there. But yeah, a lot of audio coming this way in December. So I hope you like hearing us talk, me especially. Cool. So yeah, Patreon sponsored episode. Zach sent us an album that came out in the year 1997. So before we get into the actual album we're talking about today, let's take a look at the other albums that came out in 97 that are worth talking about. In the past, we have covered from 1997 Tuesday's Freewheelin'. That was alongside Cleveland Bound Death Sentence's self-titled from that year. We also talked about Goldfinger, their album Hang-Ups with Zia Hilty. That was a really fun episode. We did the Promise Ring, Nothing Feels Good. We did that with Stefan of the Big Easy. And we did Everclear, So Much for the Afterglow. We did that with Gibran from the Give and Take and Expert Timing. And Dancehall Crashers, Honey I'm Homely. So we've hit 97 a bunch of times, honestly.
Yeah.
So we've talked 97 a few times. What stands out for you this time, taking a look at 97?
Well, you know, we've done 97 so many times probably because there's so much stuff that you could talk about from 97. There's some notable records that we haven't touched. I mean, I'm sure we've talked about them many times, probably every time we've ever looked at the charts. So it's maybe just a quick reminder. Lonesome Crowded West by Modest Mouse. There's some Built to Spill stuff. Nimrod by Green Day. Dig Me Out by Slater Kinney. Great record. Dude Ranch by Blink-182. Who could forget American Psycho by the Misfits?
What's the deal with that one? When did that
Great.
come out? Is that before Famous Monsters?
It is post Legacy of Brutality, pre Static Age official release.
Yeah.
Pre Famous Monsters. Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So it's the first Jerry only led Misfits record. Michael Graves.
So it's Graves vocals.
I bet it stinks. This website still hasn't fixed that wrong date for that Refused record. Came out in 1996, not 97.
They'll never fix it.
Website. No, because the release date said this on one thing, so we'll never change it.
Yeah, it was printed wrong in a book, some random book that was compiled by some guy.
Yeah.
It's so weird to me that Deftones being a 90s band has never really made sense to me.
that they started so early?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, like that their big records came out, like Around the Fur came out in 97.
Yeah.
Adrenaline came out in 95. It's just, which, I guess that's, nu metal goes back further than its like radio popularity. Which, I mean, when I really think about it, it does make sense because of when nu metal was like hitting the radio. It obviously makes sense the Deftones would have preceded that with their big records, being that they were kind of one of the forefathers of that genre, I guess.
Who else? I am out of curiosity curious who put out nu metal in 97, because I feel like the peak nu metal is 98 and 99. Okay, it's like the beginnings. So like $3 Bill Y'all, that was 97.
Yeah.
The first the self-titled Seven Dust album. Coal Chambers self-titled. That's kind of it though. It's still not as big. Like there's an Incubus record and a Sugar Ray album, Floored, came out that year, but I don't really call those nu metal records. But
I think adding to what makes it so perplexing to me is that it's also like this is like peak ska popularity.
Yeah, Mighty Boston. Let's face it, we've already had No Doubt for 2 years at this point.
Smash Mouth put out Fush Mang.
Yeah, that record's weird. There's ska elements to that Smash Mouth record, but I still don't think of it as a ska album.
No, Smash Mouth are that weird like space age lounge pop with just like a scoop of a variety of different exoticisms. Yeah, very Southern Californian.
But if you think about 1997, it Third Eye Blind and Everclear were like still getting a lot of radio play. I think 1997 is an undefined general sound. It's a lot of a bunch of different things, I think.
Yeah. I mean, you can absolutely, even more so when you dig below the surface, you get into your emo, you get into your hardcore. I do think that something that is, and maybe I'm just the right age for it and can have some nostalgia for it now. Something that I do think is interesting about kind of the 90s in general, but in particular the mid to late 90s, and 97 really kind of looks like a peak year for this, is how you could very feasibly be someone who listens to the radio and also collects emo records and goes to hardcore shows. Like as like undefined as everything is and as like myriad genres as there are, they all kind of exist in a form that is maybe not, I guess they're not so, I mean, hardcore probably more than anything. Hardcore and ska, at least having like their more defined subcultures. But like, yeah, like in 1997, assuming I was a teenager, I could absolutely see myself listening to Mineral and Everclear and the Aquabats in the same day.
Yeah. 97 is a weird kind of, it's a rich year and kind of key for a couple different things, different sounds. Ska feels like it was like, that was peak ska, unfortunately, and it died a quick death. But with emo, it feels like it's more of like, this is the beginnings of a pretty sustainable wave. And even hardcore has gone from like early 90s hardcore is very weird, and it's starting to really kind of shape its own. I don't know how you describe it. That probably starts more in like the mid 90s with like the Earth Crises and the Snapcases, but they're still around by 97. It also feels like an era where like maybe people are starting to listen to, like, I could see punks listening to more metal during this time too, or like more metal influence type stuff, you know. Very interesting year. This is one of those years that we've covered a couple times, and I still feel like I could go very deep on this year and get a lot out of it. It could be one of those years that's kind of like, is 97 the beginning of the depth and the wide variety of easily discoverable music? The internet is kind of just taking off by this point, and then it would be until like, you know, Napster and peer-to-peer type stuff and stronger internet connections that you begin to download stuff. But like distribution got pretty wide in the late end of the 90s for record labels. And
yeah, it's a good time period for independent labels.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of indie labels are getting good distribution. So you could theoretically be like on a message board or a chat room talking about music, and someone can recommend you some like fairly obscure band on an indie label, and you can possibly go get it. Like you could probably go to your record store, especially if you have like a good independent record store in your town, in your city. Like if you lived in like even like I feel like around where we lived, like there were record stores. You know, you could really. I mean, certainly in Charlotte, that there were decent record stores there.
Yeah.
But even like, yeah, like other small cities in North Carolina, like they had an independently owned record store, or even just like those small chains like Earshot. What was the other chain? What was the record store that Scott worked at before he started Lunchbox in Charlotte? I never remember what they were called, but they were like a decent size record store chain. And that was the thing, like with that distribution, like there were regional record store chains that had like stores in the mall where you could go pick up a Fugazi record. So
though I do think that the late 90s and into the 2000s is when like the independent record store starts to kind of go away. That's when this is like peak Sam Goody, FYE, was it Suncoast, like those kind of stores. The
Babbage's.
chain, yeah, the chains, Best Buy popping up everywhere, Circuit City carrying CDs and not just TVs and appliances anymore. It's the big boxification of music like this. I mean, it existed in the 80s, of course, but I think this is when you're starting to push out the independent record stores.
Well, and then factor in online distribution towards the late 90s. Not even just like Napster, but even like Amazon and Interpunk.
Yeah. Online distros. I guess mail order was still pretty strong in 97. Yeah. 97, very interesting year. A lot of different things going on there. But let's talk about a record that probably didn't get distributed very well in the United States, if at all. Because honestly, I don't think it did get really any distribution here. So Zach selected for us to talk about today Start Stop by him, Kerosene. On the band. Him, Kerosene were a post-hardcore alternative rock band from Luleå, Sweden, it's got weird symbols like umlauts and like that little circle on top of an A. I don't know how you're supposed to pronounce those. Anyway, it's probably nowhere near Lulea. Him Kerosene formed in 1991. The city that they're from was apparently a very popular city for musicians, as that city had lots of rehearsal spaces and bands, and lots of bands contributing on each other's records. So early members of this band would go on to play in Fireside, which Fireside, I don't know, this is a fun little connection. They're pretty well known in Sweden. They did an album where the artwork was done by Daniel Close, the independent comic artist. And you can see Fireside's poster on the front desk in high fidelity. Like there's multiple scenes where you can just see it right there.
Yeah.
Which is interesting that it even got like that far. But because it was also a real record store too. So maybe it's just whoever worked there put the sticker up. So they released their first full-length album, Recorder, in 1995 on Ampersand Records, which is an independent. They then lost 2 members of the band and released another EP called Caper on Bird Nest Records in 1996. After a series of festival appearances, the band signed to Telegram Records, which is a subsidiary of Warner Music Sweden, and they released a single and an EP in 1996, which leads us to today's album. Released October 20th, 1997 on Telegram and Warner Music Sweden. The personnel is Anders Ekström on guitar, Niklas Quintana on guitar, Nils Renberg on bass, and Tomas Turinen on drums. I hope I pronounced those right. They feel pretty straightforward, but hopefully I didn't say I'm wrong. It was also produced by the band and Eskil Lovstrom and Pelle Henriksen. So Eskil at the time had worked with the band Breach as well as Abinada up to this point, and then would later do Shape of Punk to Come. Pelle before had done an early like 89 Meshuggah release and then started working with Eskil on those exact same projects. So he's on the Shape of Punk to Come too. So the Breach connection is worth mentioning here. So it's kind of fun. So Anders, Tomas, and Niklas were all members of Breach, the Swedish hardcore band. Niklas and Tomas joined after this record. So they're later additions to Breach. So Anders was in the other one. This is Anders and Tomas's first album with the band. They were replacing Johan Forsling, who was also replacing someone else too. I think he was replacing Christopher Astrom. And Christopher Astrom and Pelle Gunnerfelt, they're the ones who went on to do Fireside. But it's a very... So the comment the thing I read early on was that the scene was very much like, oh yeah, I'll come play on your record. Yeah, cool. All right, I'm gonna go play on my other band now. You want to come play on it too? Okay, yeah. We'll just all play in each other's bands and contribute to each other's records forever.
There's like 20 musicians in Sweden.
Yeah.
It's just they all play on everything.
So,
and they're all really good at doing different things.
Yeah.
They're like, oh yes, I play in this technical death metal band, but I also make incredible pop music.
So Zach sent me this message and along with his selection, and he sent me a couple things that I already knew off the bat, but this is kind of his reasoning for picking this album. So he says, I've always been most interested in bands that kind of land between the neat categories of punk and indie rock, like Jawbox, Seaweed, Sam I Am, China Drum, and Doughboys, stuff like that. I also enjoy bands that could sound completely frenetic and unhinged at times, like Drive Like Jehu and Beaster era Sugar, or even Frodus. Him Kerosene embodies the best of all of these things on this album, along with excellent production and also just really, really good songs. I remember the first time I heard Untied, I couldn't believe what I was listening to. I had to go back and play it over and over. I hope some other people out there get to discover it now too. It's a truly special record. And he goes on to tell me that on a side note, the song titles on Apple Music and Spotify are incorrect. Refer to the Discogs for the song names. And also shout out to Tim from Pop Kid Records for turning me on to this one originally. I still listen to it with regularity. And what he means by that is like the song titles are just written wrong or just slightly different or worded weirdly or spelled differently. The songs are still in the right order. But so Zach took the when you get to the $10 tier on Patreon, you have 2 ways you can go. You can go with I really wish y'all would talk about this album. Like, it's big, it's important, it means something to a certain subsect of people. Out of all of our Patreon sponsored episodes, I guess Dave picked a few that were fairly well regarded or well known, like the Pretty in Pink soundtrack and the Jello Biafra Mojo Nixon album. But then he also picked like the Roustabouts album, and then we did the Gaunt album with Jason, and then what did Tim pick for us to talk about? I'm blanking on that one, but so then we also get picks like No More Black, This Is Satire, and Dillinger Escape Plans, Midwestern Songs. Like those were the bigger picks. It was like, get to these already, you know?
Dillinger Escape Plans, Midwestern Songs.
Dillinger 4.
That'd be fucked up. Dillinger 4 is Calculating Infinity.
That would be awesome.
That.
Yeah. So yeah, you can go the two routes. You can go the get to it already, or this is pretty obscure. Why don't you give it a listen and see what you think? So that's what this is. Him Kerosene seems to be pretty obscure. It's like not even the famous band that these guys are in. You know, Breach is more well known here. Normally I would ask you like, whoa, what's your preconceived notions about the band Him Kerosene?
None. I have none. I did not know this band existed. Every time I hear the name, I think of Him Says, We Ain't Gonna Get No Presents. Christmas Vacation. Well, they used English words, so they expected it to sell in America. So it probably got some American distro. Going back to that earlier point, but yeah, I never knew about the Breach connection, which is funny because I do love Breach. Like,
yeah,
they have a couple of records that are like some of my favorite hardcore records ever made. And I mean, I'm not, at the end of the day, I'm not shocked that they have that connection because, I mean, like I said, Swedish musicians are in like a million bands. Everything in the hardcore and punk scenes is like just tons of overlap. There's surprisingly not as many like short-lived bands and projects. I mean, some bands would have like a side project and they do like one record, but quite a few of those bands have several records and then also play in multiple bands. It's not the Richmond syndrome of starting a band and then stopping and then starting a band that's almost exactly the same and then stopping, or like Mikey Dumps, you know, moving on from one band to another side project.
Yeah. So what's the approach for Him Kerosene? Is this a side project? Because clearly Breach and Fireside were more well known.
It seems like maybe it didn't start as one, but became one. I think once it got, I think when it got to the point of being 3 Breach members,
yeah,
it's definitely in the side project category. Because they would have been doing stuff. In 97, Breach would have put out...
Oh, yeah. They put out their biggest one.
Yeah, It's Me, God.
Yeah. And I want to say there's a Fireside, too. I meant to look that up. Because I do have a note on what's going on in Sweden at the time, which we can get to later. I think Fireside has an album, too, though. They do. It is Uomini Dionore. But I guess, so Fireside and Breach are hardcore bands, though. That's kind of the main thing. So Him Kerosene is kind of them going, let's do something more melodic. Which, is it melodic? It's melodic, not singable. It's interesting. It does feel like hardcore guys doing their attempt at indie rock or alternative rock or something like that. Okay, so go ahead. You look like you're gonna say something.
Well, yeah. I mean, I guess we can get into that. Like, what exactly it is. Yeah, I would kind of call it post-hardcore because it is really hard.
Yeah.
And like I didn't even realize that there were Breach members in the band while I was listening to it. I didn't see that till afterwards, but while I was listening to it, I'm like, damn, that's the Breach guitar tone.
Oh, you recognized it right away?
I was like, that is thick. That is like concrete. Really, really in your face and grainy, but at the same time, like I feel like it's kind of like Jawbox. It's kind of like Seaweed.
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like Quicksand, even, where you're like, what is this? Like, it's post-hardcore in that it's like clearly coming from like hardcore musicians,
mm-hmm.
but they're not following like hardcore convention. Like, they're doing much more like verse chorus kind of song structure, and like having like pretty distinct melodies, and it's poppy to the point of not being hardcore, but it's not poppy in a pop punk way either.
Right. Not at all. It is. It's post-hardcore / indie alternative rock. We come from hardcore. We know how to play music like a hardcore band. We're playing loud. We're playing heavy. But the song structure is more like a straightforward rock, indie rock, mostly verse-chorus format. Not like the most strictly verse-chorus, but at least way more structured than a typical post-hardcore. Post-hardcore is such a big umbrella term, too, because it means so many different things.
Yeah, I mean, it's really like any post genre. It's like being aware of the conventions of a genre and either like taking them to their logical conclusions or taking some aspects and then combining them with others and like moving in like the opposite direction of those sensibilities. So sometimes it's like going to be super simple and just really aggressive about it, or other times it's going to be like balancing like hardness with softness and being like, oh, we're gonna have like a clean guitar part, but like the drums are super hard and the vocals are really hard, or
Mm-hmm. So who's the biggest Jawbox to me is the biggest comparison as far as like bigger names. Though listening to this record, I got on numerous different occasions 2 different bands popped into my head while I was listening to this record. One, I was really, really, really getting very strong Blue Tip vibes, which is Jason Farrell of Swizz and his, it was his next band, and then later on, the Red Hair and Redasonic and a lot of other bands, Sweet Belly Freakdown. So like that first Blue Tip record came out in '96.
Mm-hmm.
So it's I'm not saying they're writing a Blue Tip record, but I'm saying that they're coming from the same like batch of influences. They're probably borrowing from your Sam I Ams and your Drive Like Jehu. Drive Like Jehu was a big comparison I saw a couple different times, and I get that in maybe the tone, like the way the instruments sound. I get some of that Jehu. They don't really write songs the same way to me, though.
No, there's much less of that repetition and build up and break. Like it's not the tension building that then explodes into like chaos the way that Jehu does. There's definitely some of that chaos and there's definitely some tension building, but it's not structured the same way.
Mm-hmm.
But there is something to say, like tone wise, what that breach tone really is that incredibly dense sound that Jehu had, of those big full chords and a lot of distortion, which you could draw that all the way back to Bob Mould. So there's your Sugar comparison too.
Sugar there, yeah. The other band, Drive Like Jehu, wasn't the other band I thought of. I kept getting these hints of Harvey Danger too.
Right?
Yeah. Did you hear that too?
Yeah.
There's some of that Where Have All the Merrymakers Gone era Harvey Danger kind of like melody. And maybe it's the vocals that I'm really getting that on, or the vocal like melodies. But yeah, I'm like, man, which is that the same year? Is that 98? Like I'm thinking like that song Carlotta Valdez. It's the same year. Where Have All the Merrymakers Gone? 97. So again, they're probably not influenced by Harvey Danger, but like they're drawing from a shared interest.
Which is mostly Seaweed, I feel like.
Think it's Seaweed? Seaweed is so ahead of their time. Like the more I listen to stuff from like this era of the 90s, I'm like, Seaweed was doing this in like 93.
Yeah, I mean, Seaweed was doing Rival Schools before Rival Schools. Walter obviously heard Seaweed and was like, damn it. Which I got big Rival Schools on this too.
Yeah.
And that's why I keep coming back. I come back to Seaweed probably as the most prominent. Like if you were to say there's one band that influenced all of these bands, it's Seaweed.
Maybe. Yeah, Spanaway would have come out in 95. So yeah, they beat them to it.
Just
the other
that in-your-face, meaty guitars that are really heavy drums, and the songs are super melodic.
Mm-hmm. Though I guess you can't really talk about a Swedish band in 1997 without referring to the Refused in some way. Like there's definitely Refused were this, what is it? Like this fuse, this I don't know, ignition key for a particular brand of U.S. post-hardcore inspired bands in Sweden.
So Refused put out songs to fan the flames of discontent.
96.
In 96. Breach had already put out records in 95.
Yeah.
Breach put out heavier records before Refused.
Yeah.
Abhinanda was doing stuff. Fireside was doing stuff.
Or is this a case of Refused just doing what everybody else was doing already, and they just took it to the masses? They went international.
I do think that Refused gets a lot of that credit. I mean, I don't know. I've seen it both ways. I've seen it said that Refused inspired tons of Swedish hardcore bands. But then you look at like what actually came out and you're like, well, does Cult of Luna exist the way that they did because of Refused? No. They probably owe more to Breach and like American bands, sludge bands that they were trying to emulate. But
yeah.
Because the thing is, like, I feel like with Refused, there's never, people say that, but I don't know what bands started after any of the major Refused records came out.
Blindside and Self-Minded.
Both. The Christian Refused also rans.
If you like Refused, you'll also like Blindside's first album. Not really. Those both came out in 97. The Self-Minded and the Blindside self-titled. Yeah. Okay. Yeah, I can see Refused not necessarily having so much of a impact on Him Kerosene. Him Kerosene there's another subgenre going on here though that is kind of missing. Like we're tapping into the Breach hardcore side of things, but like there's the indie rock and alternative rock thing. And I think there's also them going, we like merge bands. Let's do something. We like, what label was Sugar on at that point, you know? Matador? Is that what that was?
Yeah.
So like, okay, so I found this. Their music has been described as punk for the working class, and on a website called Trästockfestivalen said, this is a translation, I think, this could only be Sweden. Him Kerosene turned out to be anything but boringly social democrat, though it was tough following the lyrics, so maybe they were. Punk with tunes a la Superchunk, loud and fun. The mosh pit is a big and very enthusiastic one. Tempting, of course, but someone has to stay behind and take notes. So I thought the Superchunk comparison was odd because I'm like, maybe, kind of. But then when the album ended, Spotify auto-played a Superchunk song next. So clearly the type of people who listen to this record are then going to a Superchunk record sometime in that day or week. So, and when I think of it in the context of No Pocket for Kitty or On the Mouth, the heavier, louder Superchunk records, it kind of makes a lot more sense.
My Spotify auto-played Constantine's. And then Seam, and then Texas Is the Reason. So we know what category this is.
Yeah. Indie rock.
Emphasis rock.
Indie that rocks.
Nothing but indie rock.
New indie rock. So does Superchunk make sense? Is this hardcore guys doing Superchunk in Sweden? Probably Sugar. I bet Sugar's an influence.
everyone forgets that people fucking crowd surfed at Superchunk shows in the 90s. They were a fucking hard band.
Yeah. Well, then Foolish comes out and everybody goes, oh, they're a sad band.
No more Mac and Laura.
Oh. And then they come back with a pop record.
Yeah. Superchunk fans got old is what happened.
We can't crowd surf anymore.
I can't do this.
My knees.
It hurts.
My insoles and my Converses.
Oh, yeah. That makes sense. Because indie rock was hard. Indie rock was rock. It was Heat Miser was rock. Like even Guided by Voices were fairly hard. Like Built to Spill, I'm sure were loud as shit when you saw them. Yeah. All of those bands were. They were playing music that with loud amps and loud drums. But they were writing music with like pop sensibilities. They had hooks, they had choruses, they had big choruses. They had, they were playing with beats and tempos that weren't strictly punk. And they just didn't have, they didn't have the money or they didn't have the desire to polish everything into like a radio rock package.
Speaking of polish, this record is slick.
Yeah. Which is one of those things. So like, I think one of those things that Refused maybe rightfully gets credit for is bringing a level of polish to hardcore that definitely inspired Thrice and Thursday and all of those bands.
Like you can't forget the two producers on this record produced Shape of Punk to Come too. So like there's money there, or at least, well, this was on a Warner subdivision. So yeah, there was money there.
Yeah. Which, Sweden had tons of metal, like very extreme metal. Like the recording industry in Sweden and Europe in general has always been very willing to put money behind extreme sounding genres, because it doesn't take long for even like black metal to get really slick and polished. Like 94 black metal is like as raw as you can get, but then like 95, 96, they're in big studios. They're recording like these really hi-fi sounding records.
Yeah, in 97 there's Dark Tranquility and like In Flames records that year. So the super slick Gothenburg sound has arrived already.
Yeah.
Which would only get slicker. Specifically 1997 stuff, and I had to filter out all the metal because there was just so much metal. But you have all the hardcore bands going on, but you also have that Hives and Helicopters garage punk thing going on,
which I think is something to consider when you're listening to this record too. Is what does make this different in Sweden is that it is a very American style of indie rock. When you look at what rock music was in Sweden, it's garage rock.
Mm-hmm.
And then like maybe more twee sounding stuff. But
yeah. Yeah. I mean, like production wise, this album, it's slick, but it's also very just big sounding. Like those guitars are loud and driving in almost every one of these songs. Like there's looking at like the the way each song begins, there's only like 2 songs that start kind of slow. For How Long You Can Hold Your Breath, which has just like the bass and guitar and vocal intro that like it's just no drums for like half the song, and then it blows up with like full band. And then Dig Here kind of has these like it starts slower, it's got these plinky riffs, and then the acoustic song at the end, Dominator. Otherwise, like everything else, excluding like the untitled noise track, it's just like right away we're gonna punch it like right out the gates. So like the guitar tone is huge. It sounds amazing. The bass tone is really cool on this album. It's very thick bass, but like it has a good bit of treble in it, so you get that grit that I really enjoy in a bass tone. And vocally, like I imagine this is probably a hard record to sing along to. I wasn't really getting any like super strong lyrics standing out to me.
Yeah. Nothing lyrically jumped out, but it's definitely not produced in a way like the vocals are audible, but they're not very well discernible. And the lyrics are probably, that kind of like.
What if I could find those?
Swedish English.
Yeah, because it's Swedish guys singing in English. I do wonder if any lyrics are available online.
Swinglish. I mean, they generally speak pretty good English, but
yeah,
which I've seen that credited to whenever they show American and British, or really whenever they show any TV shows or movies from other languages, they don't on TV. They didn't show them in with Swedish dubs. They would play them in the native language with subtitles. So they've like a lot of Swedish people had, and I mean they learn English in school, I'm pretty sure, but because like every European school system is like, oh yeah, you are going to study 2 other languages, and one of them is probably going to be English.
Yeah, and others probably because of where you are in Scandinavia, maybe German,
but
yeah, I don't see any lyrics anywhere. I do wonder what the distro was like for this album, because I can't find much about this band. Like I found a blog post on a site called I Buy Way Too Many Records, and let's see if he says how he got it. Oh, okay. So this guy got his copy from someone in a Swedish band, and someone who ran a record label called Chalk Sounds, which I think is another Swedish label. And then he bought a copy on Discogs from a seller in France. So I don't know that there is much distro. I'm amazed that it's on Spotify, to be honest.
I mean, I'm sure they never played in the U.S.
No, I doubt it. 76 monthly listeners on Spotify. I guess because it's Warner, that's the reason why it's actually been uploaded.
Yeah. Which
is disappointing, because I do think there's a lot to enjoy here. And it seems like any person who talks about this record online loves this record. Like like this guy said it was like top 10 favorite album. And Zach has it, very highly up there as one of his favorite albums too. So, and I get it, because it's really good. It's a really great record. Like when I do my notes, I rate every song on in my notes, and like everything has between mostly 4.0s. I have like one 4.7. Painted Face is probably my favorite song on the whole record. It's a really fast song. I got a 4.5, 4.25. The only 3s I have on here is like a 3.5 and a 3.75. So like everything on here is really good and right up my alley. Like I love this sound. And it's the kind of thing that made me go like, what else is going on in Sweden at this time,
Yeah, Millencolin.
Yeah, I looked that up. Millencolin. Yeah.
Yeah, there's like some noise pop kind of like that Swedish shoegaze psychedelic kind of stuff.
There's 2 that really stood out to me though. So I looked it up. There's this one band called the Bear Quartet. They put out a record called Moby Dick that came out that year. The first song on that album is fucking awesome. Like almost a 5-star song. So good. And then like the next couple songs I did not like. It was one of those records where it's like, oh no, it's a 1-song album. I didn't listen to the whole thing, but the reason why the Bear Quartet are notable for this band is that Johan Forsling, who played in the band right before this album came out, was also in that band. So he left. And I think one of the songs on here, like track 9, is written by a member of the Bear Quartet. 1, 2, 3. So yeah. And it's like, okay, I was disappointed with that record. So then I looked for the other album, looked for another band that I read mentioned, and it was the band Star Market. They put on an album called Sunday's Worst Enemy. I listened to that whole album right before we recorded. It is so good. It's in the same vein as this Him Kerosene album, but a little bit more US indie rock. Like, so I think there is more of an emerge thing going on there. I could see Superchunk being a big influence on them, whereas Jawbox might be the bigger influence on Him Kerosene. But like listening to that record and this record together, it's a great 1-2. That Star Market album is awesome.
Star Market was on Deep Elm.
Yes, they were, which actually makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
For the time, that version of Deep Elm, because the version of Deep Elm today is just post rock. What is? It's all like this soundtrack bands. I don't know. Deep Elm's weird now. But yeah, the Star Market, I was like, oh, this actually makes a lot of sense for kind of being on the label at the same time as like a Latterman, you know? But yeah, that's Sunday's, what was it called? I just forgot its name. Sunday's Worst Enemy. Really, really good record. It looks like an Alfred E. Newman on the back of his head.
It's really funny. So Him Kerosene, the fans also like section.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all Swedish bands.
Yeah.
Speedway is on there. Are they a Swedish band?
Yeah, they're new, but yeah, they're a Swedish band.
Which, I mean, it fits in a way. But then you look at the radio, and it's all Guided by Voices, Seam, Texas is the Reason, Embrace, Get Up Kids. And I mean, I'm sure that those radio stations are geared towards your own listening.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm just surprised at how that algorithm is like, oh yeah, this is definitely similar to all kinds of music that you listen to. Yeah, I mean, this record is just obscure, but I think if people heard it, they'd like it. Yeah. I really enjoyed listening. It was really fun to listen to be like, I hear a little bit of this, I hear a little bit of that. You know, it really lands in between Rival Schools and Seaweed, and I even heard a little bit of Blenderhead.
I actually have that in my notes too. There's one song in particular where I wrote down on the song Ladybugs is track 2. I said there's a little Billy Power on this vocal here.
He has a very Billy Power voice.
Yeah. A Harvey Danger Billy Power voice.
Yeah.
I'm not fully sure which member is the singer because there are no credits to who plays what. I figured out who played guitar because the two guys are credited as guitarists on Discogs. It says guitar player from Sweden, and then the one was listed as drummer from Sweden, and the one didn't have an instrument, so I assumed he was the bass player. I think I did read one thing that said guitarist. So there's the one guy who's the new one in the band, Anders, because I wrote that this is the first record for Anders and Tomas. So Tomas is the new drummer. Anders is the new guitar player who's replacing Johan Forsling, who replaced, I believe, Christopher Astrom or Pelle Gunnerfeld. I'm not sure which one played what on that first record. So that means to me it's Nicholas Quintana's band. He might be the singer then. I don't know. I can't say. Well, let me look at that article, that blog the guy wrote, because he mentions vocals. Oh, okay. Oh, it's two vocalists. I thought so. See, man, these records, give me some liner notes. Okay. The vocals on this album are what elevate it to the highs it reaches. Nicholas Quintana's higher-pitched, pissed-off Doug March-sounding voice, layered on top of this storm of music, is simply a perfect combination. Just listen to a few moments of Untied or Neutrino or whatever gets you by. Start, Stop is absolute classic. Well, maybe not. Maybe it is just Nicholas is the singer. I don't see any mention of another singer. Who's Doug March?
The Halo Benders?
Built to Spill.
Built to Spill.
Okay, and then it goes back to what I was saying. I think Nicholas is the kind of the driving force of this band. And Nicholas is the one who joined Breach after this record. So they're like, all right, yeah, I'll join Breach. Because according to the piece I read, it was considered a disappointment by the record label, and they were dropped. They released one more EP in 2001 and then called it quits. But this falls under the, what were you expecting? You expect this record to sell that many copies?
Yeah.
I don't know. I'm sure the best-selling albums in Sweden at the time are still pop records, like in every country. Pop records are the best-selling records, or records from other countries because fucking the U.S. and England dominate everybody else's music plays worldwide.
I found a Facebook post that someone posted of a Him Kerosene t-shirt. It is yellow. It says Him Kerosene on the front in this kind of like bubble font, like a sans serif outline font with a little alien head smoking a big fat doobie. And the back print has like a full body of the alien, and he's got his arm wrapped around up to his other shoulder, and then the other arm is up, like elbow bent up, and he's throwing like metal horns basically, but not up. They're just like like the wrist is bent down. It's really weird. Maybe we'll post it in the show notes or something, but hideous shirt. Really ugly design. Doesn't make any sense.
That probably goes with like whatever's going on with Millencolin.
Yeah.
In Sweden at the time.
It's very Millencolin looking artwork. Wow. I found a copy of Stop on CD for $50 or best offer.
eBay?
Yeah.
Yeah, I saw that too. So it just means it just didn't get over here. It feels like, Hey, I found Sweden's singles and album charts from Billboard magazine the week this album was released. So let's take a look. Number 1 single, Something About the Way You Look Tonight, Candle in the Wind, 1997, Elton John.
Yeah.
Something by a band called Q, Spice Up Your Life by the Spice Girls, As Long As You Love Me by the Backstreet Boys, Dr. Jones by Aqua, Tub Thumping by Chumbawamba, Save Tonight by Eagle Eye Cherry. Now that makes sense. He's Swedish.
Yeah.
Barbie Girl by Aqua, Du Var Har by Kent. Now Kent is a Swedish band because I saw their name when I pulled up records in Swedish. They're like an indie band.
Yeah.
So that song was doing well. Avenues Refugee Camp All Stars featuring Praz. Oh, okay, yeah, that song. The albums seem a little bit more Swedish specific. Magnus Uggla, Vikingarna, Era, The Verve, Aqua, Sarah Brightman, Eros Ramazzotti, Enya, Backstreet Boys, and Eagle Eye Cherry. They love it. So yeah, it's just pop music. That's what's popular. I don't know. Is Aqua Swedish?
I thought they were German or Dutch.
Danish, Norwegian.
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's probably a lot of Europop on the charts back then in Sweden. So I don't know where this noisy post-hardcore alternative indie rock record was gonna fall on on those charts. But Refused was big the next year. So I'm curious what Kent sounds like. Du Var Har, 1997. Oh, maybe I'll edit the song in. That's kind of a cool song.
Yeah, I don't know what to compare that to.
Like I was thinking like Oasis in the beginning, but
No.
not when he got to the chorus.
Yeah.
What was the Verve doing that year? I never remember which is which. Which one does Freshman? Which one's Bittersweet Symphony? Is the Verve?
Bittersweet Symphony is the Verve.
Okay, the Verve was the critically acclaimed one.
Yeah.
So maybe it's probably occupying that lane, listening to that song, which was in their top whatever, it feels like there is room for a him Kerosene. So maybe it was just like didn't connect with people.
The vocals aren't upfront enough.
Yeah, they're kind of
buried. And I don't know if it helps or hurts you to sing in English in Sweden. Like,
that was in Swedish.
Kent was in Swedish and they were popular, but
Barbie Girls in English.
Yeah, I mean they listen to plenty of English language music. So
Candle in the Wind '97. Yeah, I don't know. I could see it. Vocal forward music sells better than buried vocal music. That's just how it is, unfortunately. But you would hope it would have done a little better. But I don't know. Interesting. Any closing thoughts on this record?
No, not really. I don't know. It's a really obscure record, but it's a really enjoyable record, and I think more people should hear it. It's not like earth shattering for me. I don't know that I'm gonna come back to it a lot, but yeah, I don't know. Maybe it'll connect with people listening to this episode. It's good. It's really good.
Yeah, I really like it. I would give it on the Meltzer scale. I'd probably give it a 4.25 out of 5. It's pretty up there. I really enjoyed this record a lot. I mean, I love any time a band kind of hits this particular sound. This, apparently it's a bad word to say angular in music reviews anymore. We're not supposed to say music's angular anymore, but what other word are you supposed to use for?
I want to start a female fronted angular.
What's the caveman? What's the caveman one? Caveman beat.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but that's all 3 of those things are an accurate descriptor of Sleater-Kinney. It's not a bad thing.
Right. But yeah, that post-hardcore with a alternative rock edge to it. Sugar, Jawbox, Doughboys, Sam I Am a little bit. Harvey Danger's big record. That record's good, in case anyone's never heard that album. You might think of them just as the Flagpole Sit-Up Band, but like the rest of that record's pretty hard. I'd say if you like this record, you might like the Blender Head record that we mentioned. Which one was in '97? Is that Prime Candidate, or have we gotten to Muchacho Viva yet? Oh, we're past Muchacho. This is the valley between Muchacho and Figurehead, so they hadn't quite. I recommend Figurehead's on the forefront. Muchacho Viva probably too. Jawbox. What had Jawbox done in '97? Were they done by '97? The self-titled came out in '96.
Yeah, this is Boeing Airlines. Started in '97. They put out Carnival and Scissoring.
The Blue Tip album, Discord 101. Yeah, I recommend all those records to go along. That Star Market record, fucking rules. Check that out too. Yeah, a lot of good stuff to come out of this episode. So, Zach, thank you so much. I hope you enjoyed this episode. And if you want to become a patron and choose what album we talk about, like I said, head over to patreon.com, punklottopod. We're on all the other social medias, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. Voicemail 202-688-PUNK. Forgot to do that at the beginning. It's coming up at the end of the year, so call in and leave a voicemail telling us your favorite albums of 2022. We'll play it on the show, and give us a rating on iTunes and Spotify. So I think that's everything. All right, everyone, and we will see you next week.